Okay.
Yeah.
The seating arrangement.
I will call them on the stage.
Translation is a public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it on
Okay.
or off?
On.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
No,
Off
but I
it.
want to.
No, no, no.
I want to turn.
No.
Okay.
Off. On.
Okay.
Off.
And then
Alexa. Okay.
how will you know which mic do you have to turn on?
Only. Only. Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. You hear about it. It's a very
This one is for you.
international event here. We have China,
Hope so.
Bangladesh,
Yeah.
Angola.
So at the beginning we will have the keynote speakers
Unity.
sitting here. Then once they finish, they will sit back, and I will call the panelists, including you.
Okay, cool.
Okay, but at
I'm.
the moment he can sit here in the front row. But he's not here, right?
He is. He's.
Translation.
So he can sit here at the
Okay.
front row.
Cool. Where am I going to be located?
Whatever you want. Maybe there.
Over. Yes.
Translate, you can go up there and translate, or here, whatever you feel more comfortable.
Okay, so I can be. Can I be next to him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
There are a lot of people.
You have one minute.
但是每一个 question 每个问题您是最后一个回答的。
就第一个问题，第一个最后一个。
You can easily
对，就是
Yeah. I'm gonna test my
very
Portuguese
easy to
understand. He was understanding.
如果这样的话，就是他们会自己回答，然后您是每一个问题的最后一个回答。
We need free coffee.
座位的话，他会一个
Not the best time.
对，因为他是会给人做一个介绍，就是他会介绍一下您是谁，然后邀请谁，然后您会坐在第一排。呀，您可以坐在。Do you know if anyone's Thank you.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
我可能要去一下卫生间。哦，对，您应该来了。然后
你赶紧去，卫生间在哪里？你知道吗？
我知道在哪，我想要跑一下卫生间。我也要去。
那你俩赶紧。
Okay.
Thank you. I LEDARS means I will not start having opinions.
Só vocês. Achei a mesa. A foto sai bem. Se a saída não tiver preenchido, vai ter que encostar mais. Se a saída tiver preenchido, vai ter que ir para ali.
Hello.
OK。
Yeah.
Hello. I think we can start already. We are 10 minutes late. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on climate policies and finance for global adaptation in the Global South. How can CSOs promote the way forward? My name is Ana Ramos, and I will be moderating this session led by the China Association for NGO Cooperation in collaboration with Humana People to People, my organization, LEDARS from Bangladesh, and Green Rivers. I think it's obvious for everyone in this room that no one can escape the impacts of climate change. And it's equally obvious that the effects of climate change at the global level are not uniform, and that the poorest countries, those in the Global South, are the ones contributing the least to industrial pollution, while they are the ones who are being hit the hardest. There is also a growing recognition at the global level that communities are the drivers of change, as they are the ones who have the local, historical, environmental, and cultural knowledge about their needs, about their specific needs, as well as how to solve them, how to address them. However, getting the resources into their hands doesn't generally fit the traditional top-down system of our global economic and political system. Climate finance is not different, and at the top we have developed countries who are yet to fully fulfill their commitment to climate change, and the mechanisms in place to channel these funds are still largely inaccessible or very difficult to access for communities and civil society organizations. In order to effectively fight climate change and address global inequalities, the Global South communities and civil society must be at the forefront of debate and action. They must be actively involved in decision-making regarding investments, policies, and partnerships. And that's why we are here today, to discuss inclusive NDCs, national policies, to promote meaningful participation of CSOs in climate adaptation. So to that end, we have gathered a great panel of speakers representing the governments, a few governments from the Global South, and the civil society. So the first part, in the first part of this session, we will hear from the representatives from the governments, and in the second part, we will have a panel discussion with civil society. But before that, and without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Xiangyi Wang. She is the Vice Chairperson and Executive Director of the China Association for NGO Cooperation, and she will give some introductory remarks.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I'm Xiangyi Wang from CANGO. I'm very honored to have this opportunity come here together with our partners, Humana People to People and the LEDARS. This year is our first time to work together for climate change topic. CANGO was founded in 1992. This year is our 30 years history, and since 2007, we support Chinese NGOs to participation in UNFCCC conference we call COPs. Up to now, have 15 years, and the CANGO's mission is to support Chinese NGOs and international NGOs to collaboration on climate change issues. And in last more than 10 years, we support more than 100 Chinese NGOs come to COPs to participation through side event, organization, press conference, submit position paper to UNFCCC Secretariat to deliver the voice from Chinese NGOs. And we also do a lot of collection Chinese NGOs stories such as this brochure, is we collect 6 cases from different regions in China. The topic is climate change adaptation. So how to collaborate from CSO level, we promote the community adaptation topic. And another one is we also cooperation with some experts to do some research, such as for this is a new report, is talk about climate change adaptation gap analysis. And in recent 2 or 3 years, we met some climate disasters, such as last year is a flood in Henan province and Xiangyi province. That's let Chinese people, we have more experience what is climate change is urgent. All people from the world, we need to take action to respond to climate change, especially for adaptation issue. So why today we together with our partners come here to organize this side event. Very welcome all speakers and audience come here together with us to do this dialogue, and looking forward, we have more collaboration on this topic in the future. And finally, I want to thank you, our partners, Green River, although they haven't come here, but they join us online, and LEDARS, Human People to People, and also audience and the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we are going to move to Angola now. Southern Africa, including Angola, is one of the regions that will be hardest hit by climate change. The IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees identified the border area between Angola and Namibia as one of the world's key hotspots of climate change, at extreme risk of desertification due to decreasing rainfall and higher frequency of extreme heat waves. This will, of course, have a huge impact, unprecedented impact in the local communities and in their livelihoods. So I would like to welcome now Mr. Januario Augusto, environmentalist and president of the environmental network Mayombe in Angola, who will be representing Her Excellency Paula Cristina Coelho, Secretary of State for Environment at the government of Angola, who couldn't be here with us today.
Muito obrigado a todos. Saudação a todos os presentes.
Thank you very much to everyone. I greet all of you who are present.
Angola é país de África, está situado na faixa litoral do Atlântico.
Angola is an African country situated at the Atlantic coast in the southern part.
O nosso objetivo hoje aqui veio em representação de Sua Excelência, a Secretária de Estado, a doutora Paula Francisco, que devia se fazer presente neste ato, mas por imperativo de calendário, então não pôde se fazer presente.
I represent the Secretary of State, Paula Coelho, who was impeded in being here in this event and asked me to present her.
Dizer que Angola, no quadro das recomendações de saída da COP26,
She's representing Angola at the COP27.
Já elaborou a sua estratégia, que é a Lei 216/22, de 23 de agosto. Foi aprovada a lei, não é? Que é a Estratégia Nacional das Alterações Climáticas de Angola,
which already before COP26 in August last year decided the strategy of Angola to address climate change in the country.
Por esse facto, dizer que no quadro das linhas orientadoras do nosso plano de ação,
it defines all the strategic lines of action for Angola,
o qual o governo, com seus parceiros, tem vindo a desenvolver já algumas ações.
and out of these strategies, the government is already developing some of the actions.
Um facto assente é o projeto de desenvolvimento do CAFO,
One of them
do
is
Cunene, do
one of,
CAFO na região do Cunene.
one of them is the project CAFO in the region of Kunene,
que visa essencialmente assegurar às comunidades locais e a atividade de pastorice,
which helps the communities, first and foremost the pastoral communities,
Yeah.
to adapt to the changes,
por formas a criar sistema de irrigação para o abastecimento de água às populações nas comunidades, assim como o abastecimento de água para o consumo do gado,
both for the population and for the animals in that area, which is cattle.
Estamos a falar desse projeto como referência número 1 no quadro do programa de resiliência para o desenvolvimento das comunidades no novo quadro da transição energética.
We talk about this project as the first one of several which are working with the communities in order to ensure the transition and also integrates elements with energy.
Existem várias outras iniciativas, como a relacionada com a recuperação dos mangás,
There are also other initiatives which are related to the protection of mangroves,
a questão do repovoamento florestais na zona semidesértica,
protection of forest areas in very semi-desert or arid areas.
destacar aqui aquilo que tem sido o projeto que está a ser desenvolvido em parceria com a ADPP, Ajuda de Povo para Povo, onde está a desenvolver um amplo trabalho na região do Cubango, na região fronteiriça entre Namíbia e Angola, projeto este que nós gostaríamos de já contar com o apoio de todos os presentes, uma vez que Angola tem esse desafio.
We also want to mention the program that has been developed in partnership with ADPP of Angola and OSS, which deals with addressing the drought in the southwestern part of Angola and the northern part of Namibia. It is therefore a transfrontier, transborder program.
Constitui preocupação das organizações da sociedade civil angolana, ONG e não só,
We want to stress the importance of working together with the civil society in Angola.
e dizer que de várias ações, o nosso plano de ação prevê o enquadramento das comunidades para um desenvolvimento econômico local, que passa necessariamente pela resiliência e integração das comunidades aos programas de desenvolvimento local.
To fulfill the strategy, our programs need to work on reaching those communities and necessarily also involve those communities in creating this resilience which we are aiming at.
Dizer que a ADPP é um parceiro que vai dinamizar e garantir que, de facto, todo o apoio que será mobilizado a partir desta COP27,
The government wants to see the cooperation with ADPP as a dynamization of this relation that it needs to have with the communities.
o qual gostaríamos contar com o apoio dos presentes aqui nesta sala, no sentido de criar sinergia para mobilização das instituições financeiras, das instituições parceiras, outras organizações internacionais que apoiam o programa das alterações climáticas nos países africanos.
Therefore, we also want to see everyone here in this room supporting the efforts of the civil society to get financing to address the questions about adapting to climate change in Angola.
De certa forma, são as palavras que eu trago para elucidar os caros presentes.
These are the words that the Secretary of State would like to give to this forum.
O único repto que deixo é apelar a toda a sociedade, a toda a comunidade, os países aqui presentes e as organizações aqui presentes, sobretudo a China como conhecida grande potência mundial, que pode também dar o seu contributo à semelhança do que já tem feito em outros projetos de desenvolvimento para Angola.
We like to see in this forum a country like China, a great power, which we also invite to support this push for all the institutions, both national and internationally, to make the funding necessary to make these changes we need to do.
Muito obrigado a todos e, desde já, em nome do governo angolano, no qual fazemos parceria e de todos os angolanos ambientalistas e não só, pretendemos uma sociedade justa que permite que até 2035 saímos deste conflito de ideias que temos vindo a viver até hoje. O marco de 2022 até 2035 queremos emissão zero em todo o mundo. Obrigado.
With this plan in Angola of achieving net zero in 2035, which is the strategy, we look forward to a very dynamic cooperation between the government and the civil society to see that this can become reality in name of the Angolan government. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesper, for the translation. And thank you, Mr. Augusto. So from Angola, we are going to travel to Bangladesh, one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. And indeed, managing climate risks has been central to Bangladesh development history. And the country is... Welcome, Mr. Sam. So I was saying that managing climate risks has been central to Bangladesh development history, and the country is today considered an example, a world leader in terms of climate adaptation and disaster preparedness. We have here today Mr. Shaukat Ali, Director of Climate Change and International Convention at the Environment Department of the Government of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, distinguished speakers from China and Angola, colleagues from China, the organizers of the event, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. At the outset, let me speak about the vulnerabilities of Bangladesh, then I shall come to the financial issues a little bit later. According to German Watch, Bangladesh is considered as the 7th most vulnerable countries in the world. We have completed our National Adaptation Plan. We have submitted our NAP on 31st October this year, just before COP started, which is not yet included in the NAP portal. According to our NAP, we have some estimates. So this estimate suggests that by 2050, 1 in every 45 people in the world and 1 in every 7 people in Bangladesh should be displaced by climate change. So you can understand the vulnerability. And if we take into consideration that if we, Bangladesh is the most densely populated country in the world. Our coastal population is 39 million compared to the entire population of 165 million. And in our NAP, we have estimated that there will be like huge internal displacement. So 19.9 million people will be displaced by 2050 due to sea level rise and other climate catastrophes. We have conducted a sea level rise study, and I'm the project director of that study. Center for Environment and Geographic Information Services and Institute for Flood and Water and Flood Modeling, Bangladesh, they supported us to conduct the study. So from that study, you have identified that 3.8 to 5.8 millimeter sea level rise is increasing every year in different coastal zones. It's not uniform in the entire coastal areas. So we considered that from this study that if there is a 50% sea level rise, 50 centimeter sea level rise, so the inundation of the country will be 11%. And if it's 95 centimeter sea level rise, then 15% of the coastal region of Bangladesh will be inundated. 15% of the country will be inundated. So that you can understand the country where 165 million population lives in 147,000 square kilometers. So if 15% of the country is under sea and then 19.9 million population is displaced, so the country which has the highest densely populated country, how we within that country will be able to allocate, relocate these populations. So these are the vulnerabilities. And you know, as the government of Bangladesh, we are trying to follow all the UNFCCC processes. We have already developed our nationally determined contribution. We have submitted that on 26 August 2021. And as I mentioned that on 31st October, we have submitted our NAP. So in our NDC, we committed that our emission reduction will be, unconditional emission reduction will be 6.73%, while in case of conditional contribution, it will be 15.12%. In total, we committed that 89 million tons of emission will be reduced from business as usual scenario by 2030 from different sectors in Bangladesh. In our NAP, we have identified eight vulnerable sectors, and we have estimated that the total financial requirement for these vulnerable sectors will be $230 billion for the next 27 years, from 2023 to 2050. So it's a huge requirement to make the country climate resilience. This is understandable because we have a long coastal region and very low-lying area, and huge population is living there. If you take into consideration the entire coastal population, this is much higher than the entire island nation population. So you can see a single country's vulnerability, how much that could be. And in policy issues, we have also worked on different other activities. When we prepared our NAPA, we realized that NAPA is not adequate. So we prepared our Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan to comprehensively address all the climate change activities in the country. So we have updated that recently in 2022. We have updated the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. We have a Delta Plan. Our country is a deltaic region. So for this century, we have developed a plan where we have also considered climate change issues as well. And recently, we have developed Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. You know, our Prime Minister was the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum for the last 2 years. Now Ghana is the current president. So during that period, we took decision that every country will develop a climate prosperity plan. So our name of our father of the nation is Mujibur Rahman. So we have given the name of our climate prosperity plan, Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, which will, the time period is 22 to 2041. And 2041 is our year where we have set the target that we shall become a developed country by that time. Now let me focus on climate finance issues, a little bit on climate finance issues. We have domestic resources for climate finance. At the same time, we also access international climate finances. And then later on, I shall come to local level financial resources allocation and involvement of the CSOs. So we have a domestic climate mechanism. As many of you may know, that we call it Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund. So over the last 10 years, government has dedicatedly allocated $490 million for mainly adaptation and some mitigation activities. And so far, we have allocated these resources for 851 small and medium projects and most of it, more than 600 projects, has already been implemented. Unfortunately, before I go to international finance, let me also mention that we have dedicated climate-related budgetary allocations. You know, we have like about $45 billion annual development program. So out of that annual development program, government has like different environmental and climate change allocations. So our recent climate-related allocation is $3 billion, $3.08 billion in the financial year 2022-2023. So you can see, apart from dedicated resources, we have climate-related allocation from different ministries. So while different ministries implementing their project, they're taking into consideration also climate issues. So automatically some part of the climate change issues is being addressed by those sectoral activities. Now let me come to the international financial resource that we have accessed so far. So from Green Climate Fund, we have accessed like 101.14 million is in grant from 5 projects, and also we have accessed concessional loans. It's $250 million. From LDCF, over the last 10-15 years, we have got only $34.41 million. We have a small brochure where you can find, it is over there, you can find all the major activities of Bangladesh climate change in that brochure. So in $34.41 million we accessed from LDCF, and from JEF we have accessed $24.66 million and about $10 million from Adaptation Fund. So in total, the allocation from the international community is less than our country allocation. And certainly, as I mentioned, our requirement is very high to make the country climate resilient as regards to our NAP. So I would actually in the negotiation and in different arena, we are discussing that increasing amount of resources should be channeled from development partners and international processes, specifically for NAP implementation. And from climate finance, we expect that a good decision will come so that all the countries that have submitted their NAPs, they will get additional resources for the NAP implementation. How many minutes I have? 1 minute. 2 minutes, okay. So let me focus on some other initiatives that we have done. We have constructed 353 kilometer embankment. This is recent activities. Actually, our coastal area is protected by 139 polders. The combined length is 3,450 kilometer. That is protecting our coastal areas, but there are still unprotected areas where actually sea level rise will threaten our existence. So we have constructed 53 kilometer embankment in recent years, and we have like 591 kilometer canal excavation, 726 kilometer river bank protection, 2,123 kilometer river excavation and dredging, and specifically related to climate change, we have developed 12 stress tolerant crop varieties, so saline tolerant varieties, and then in flash flood region, short duration rice varieties. And we have also developed or generated like 19,428 metric ton stress tolerant seeds. And we have distributed a lot of housing to the vulnerable communities, like 117,000 houses we have distributed to the vulnerable communities in recent years. I think during the last 2 years, and hopefully in the next year next 2 years we are going to distribute another 65,000 houses. And we have constructed 5-story building in coastal regions. It's 139 building where 442,000 landless families can reside. So we call it Azara, or housing and settlement projects. We are doing that. For CSOs and private sector or the NGOs, we have a small grants program from JEF. We have make it operational so that up to $50,000 can be assessed by NGOs and CSOs for different kinds of activities. And also, we have done some development partners like FCDO, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. They have taken up a 35 million pound project for the next 4 or 5 years, where they will implement this project with CSOs and NGOs in the coastal areas, specifically in Sundarban areas. So LEDARS can be part of the process as well. And also let me mention that from the domestic resources that I mentioned, Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund, there is opportunity of accessing resources by the NGOs for, different climate change activities. And also in the local areas, lot of our municipalities or Paurosabha, we call Paurosabha, they come up with different projects, and we try to allocate more resources to them so that local communities get benefit out of this climate change trust fund that we have established. So this in short was my presentation, and I will be very happy if there is any question from your side. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sokat. The last country we will examine today is China, a country that has been increasing its efforts in carbon emission mitigation over the last decade, but that has recently started to seriously tackle the equally problematic issue of climate adaptation. Last June, the Chinese government updated the adaptation strategy to better prepare the country for 2035. We have here Mr. Zhang, Director of Foreign and Exchange Department at the China National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation. Maybe you can use that.
Thank the chair introduced me, and I'm honored to come here to introduce the China Adaptation Strategy and Financial Policy briefly. Next slide. China issued the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy for the first time in 2013, which defined the task and the requirement for adaptation to climate change from 2014 to 2020, providing a basic guidance for adaptation to climate change. China launched the preparation of the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy 2035, focused on the strengthening overall guidance, communication, and coordination, strengthening observation and estimate of climate change impact, and improving the ability of key area and key vulnerable region to adapt to climate change. China actively promotes adaptation in key areas such as infrastructure, agriculture, water resources, ocean, forests, and grass, and human health. Initially constructs a regional pattern of the urbanization, agriculture development, and ecological sector adaptation, and promotes the improvement of the ability to adapt to climate change. This year, 17 departments of the Commission jointly issued the National Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change 2035, including the Ministry of the Ecology and Environmental, National Development and Reform Commission, Minister of Science and Technology, and other ministry. You can see documents shown in the right side. The document is an important measure to implement of the national strategy of the active coping with climate change and help the construction of the ecological civilization. And maintain including the basic situation, general requirement, strengthening climate change moderating, early warning, and risk management. The fourth is improve the climate change adaptation of the nature. The fifth is improve the climate adaptability of economic and social system. The sixth is construct a regional structure adaptive to climate change. And the last one is the strategy implementation. You can see the different objective in the 2025, 2030, and 2035. In different place, you can see the adaptation goal is different. By 2025, the policy system and institutional mechanism for climate change adaptation will be basically formed. And in 2030, the policy system and the institutional mechanism for climate change adaptation will be generally well established. And in 2035, the more activity will be improved. In terms of the problem, we can see in the world, less than 25 of the global climate fund are used for the climate adaptation. According to the data of the United Nations Environmental Programme, the European country faced an annual funding gap of more than $100 billion to adapt to the climate change. The United Nations have repeatedly calling on all investors and multilateral banks to commit to increase the share of the climate adaptation and resilience funding to 50% of the total climate funding by 2024. How to solve the problem of funding shortage and how to ensure the efficient implementation of the adaptive fund still needed to be explored in many ways. In China, it is established that the financial need for adaptation from 2016 to 2030 will be about 24 trillion yuan, equal to an annual average about 1.61 trillion yuan. Among them, the adaptation fund needed for infrastructure, agriculture, water resources, and so on. In which transportation infrastructure and energy infrastructure account for about 33.1% and of the total infrastructure fund and demand respectively. Yes. In 2020, October 26, the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, the National Development and Reform Commission, and other institutes issued a guidance opening on the promotion, investment, and financial for climate change. The guidance opening for the first time clarified the definition and support scope of the climate investment and the financing, pointing out that climate investment and financing is to guide and promote more funds to invest in investment and financing activities in the field of the climate change in order to achieve the goal of national independence, contribution, and low carbon development. And the support scope include both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. For the government, we needed to the policy formulation, project accumulation, and financing, and fund the guidance. The more important is policy formulation. To the different institutes, it has a different strategy. For the Developing Financial Institute, the next slide. Yes, next slide, yes. Oh, okay. For the Developing Financial Institution, is a non-profit institution or low-profit institution. The main function is to establish a sound risk screen framework and provide project development support and provide low-cost financial support. And for some of the commercial finance institutes, it's a different strategy and activities. The first is the improved investment risk assessment, build the framework, and change the investment strategy and promote investment and financing for climate adaptation construction. And the third is develop the financial product for climate adaptive construction, investment, and financing. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chen. And thank you very much to all the speakers of this first session. Please give another round of applause. And I would like now to invite the panelists of the second section of this event. Please welcome Mr. David Kerkhoff, Program Coordinator for Climate Change and Agriculture at Humana People to People, Mr. Sunil Arkadia, Regional Policy and Campaign Manager from Oxfam Asia, who is joining us online, Mr. Haula Hawi, Climate Department Coordinator, Sahara and Sahel Observatory, Mr. Mohon Kumar, Executive Director from LEDARS, Bangladesh, Mr. Yahanta Basu, Faculty Member at Calcutta University and Director of NGO India, and Mr. Nimasairen, Senior Consultant on Climate Adaptation in Pastoral Areas at the Shan Shui Conservation Center. Welcome.
It's actually Haula Jawi because it's J in French, not Spanish.
Jawe, yeah. Haula Jawe. Sorry. Okay, so my first question is addressed to David and Sunil. In your opinion, as civil society, what is the added value of CSOs-led climate action, and what are the barriers that you face in accessing climate funding? Maybe you can start, David.
Thank you, Anna. So to give a bit of background on the experiences that I speak from is with Humana People to People, which I represent, the network of organizations which over the last 10 years have started to become more interested in the climate issues as they could see it in the communities, right? The needs they were facing. So 5-6 years ago, we started working on trying to bring climate finance from these big boxes high up there to the community. It's been a long struggle, and it is a long struggle, and it's a very steep learning curve over the past couple of years. But now we have finally managed to bring some of this funding to the community. So we launched an adaptation fund project earlier this year in Angola and Namibia, which the government of Angola mentioned earlier. And then just now we had our first Green Climate Fund project approved in Guinea-Bissau in cooperation with OSS, who will speak later on this panel. So that's the experience where I speak from to address the question you have asked. In terms of advantages of including civil society in accessing climate finance, I think there are so many actors in the whole system, right? From government to private sector to the donor to civil society to NGOs. And all of them have strengths and weaknesses. And somehow we have to leverage all those strengths and put them together to make the whole thing work. So one of the advantages of civil society is that generally they're nationally based, even locally based. So they have the capacity to bring all those actors together in a country. They often have long-term experiences in the countries, relations with the governments, relations with communities, relations with the people, and this makes them very well placed to design projects that fit to the needs for addressing adaptation in our case. Additional to this, there is an existing trust between the communities and those organizations generally, which helps, of course, in bringing real bottom-up, locally led adaptation forward, which has to be designed locally. And civil society is well placed to facilitate this process, whereas governments, in the context where we speak from, which is LDCs and low-income countries, often don't have the capacity to get to the community level and do this meaningful consultation with communities. So that's where an added value of civil society comes in. In addition to that, I think what civil society adds to the whole issue of implementation of adaptation projects is that they know very well the challenges and the needs and the priorities of the communities. And that goes beyond climate needs, right? So climate change doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are many other issues that need to be addressed at the community level, be it gender, be it education, be it poverty. And this has to be intertwined with adaptation action. It cannot happen in a vacuum. I think that's often forgotten by climate finance and by high-level institutions who see climate finance or adaptation very in a closed box, kind of. And our role as civil society is to kind of break that and then bring more holistic projects to the agenda. So I think that those are the advantages. In terms of challenges, I think I'm not going to surprise anyone by saying that there are big gaps in capacity, there are big gaps in finance between the high-level requirements by the top experts in the field who work at these climate finance institutions and the reality of people on the ground. There is a huge, huge gap in knowledge and in capacities and in requirements that are put to organizations who want to access climate finance. So there is, it has been really challenging for us to access climate finance in meeting all those requirements and demands from the donors. And I think that goes for everyone who works on climate finance. This gap is increasing, and it seems like no one is making an effort to actually bring those things together. So that's one of the big challenges. One more challenge that I want to mention is the vision of the climate finance institutions is very often dominated by Western ideologies, Western ideas of how development or adaptation or mitigation should happen. And this doesn't necessarily match with the needs and the priorities at the community level. So I think that is also a challenge that we also have to overcome when we try to access climate finance. I think I'll leave it at that. I think I have my 4 minutes there, so I'll thank you, Anna. I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, David. I'd like to give the floor now to Sunil. Let's try.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. You can hear me right?
We cannot
Hello?
hear you. Just wait a second, please.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
We can hear you now.
Thank you, Anna. I'm Sunil Acharya from Oxfam in Asia, joining you all from Kathmandu in Nepal. Greetings to everyone in the side event room and also those listening online. I'm honored to share my thoughts in this important side event and would like to start by thanking the organizers. Civil society organizations work closely with the people and communities on the front lines of climate change. They promote equitable access to financing and decision-making power of the communities, especially groups such as women and marginalized who are disproportionately vulnerable to climate change. The CSOs support the local communities, develop and scale up innovative adaptation solutions. CSO-led adaptation, or I would like to say locally led adaptation, can unlock, support, and leverage the enormous potential and creativity of communities to develop and implement solutions to deal with climate impacts. Shifting power to the local civil society organizations and local communities gives them more direct access to finance and equips with the decision-making power on how adaptation actions are identified, prioritized, designed, and implemented. It can catalyze adaptation that is effective, equitable, and transparent. However, current implementation modalities are not fit for purpose. The CSOs and local actors often lack the access to the resources and agency needed to implement adaptation solutions effectively. Oxfam's latest research, Climate Finance in Asia, assessing the state of climate finance in one of the world's most climate vulnerable regions, revealed that there is an acute lack of finance compared to the needs of the countries in Asia to adapt to climate change. Over the period from 2013 to 2020, only about 113 billion US dollar was committed to Asia, which is just about 14 billion USD in average per year. Alarmingly, majority of this financing is in the form of loans that the vulnerable developing countries will require to repay. When grant equivalence is considered, the amount of international climate finance provided was just about 6 billion US dollars per year against the reported 14 billion US dollars. When you look at the needs of these countries in Asia, it comes to 1.3 trillion US dollars per year from now until 2030. You can see the massive gap between the need versus what is available. More worryingly, only 1/3 of the reported climate finance goes to adaptation. Though it is challenging to access the degree to which finance is locally led due to the lack of transparency, our estimate shows that only about 0.5% of the total climate finance is locally led. This means that local actors don't have a say in how climate finance is governed or spent. This means that the funding modalities created at the international level are restrictive to national NGOs and other local actors. We need to urgently change the way things work and deliver adaptation in line with the principles of equity and justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunil. We have here with us Howie. No, Howie. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's French.
Howie.
Jawe. Yeah.
Jawe.
Yeah,
okay.
Please.
Haula. Jawe. You're representing the Sahara and Sahel Observatory, which is an accredited entity to the GCF and the Adaptation Fund. In your perspective, as an accredited entity, what are the pros and cons of involving civil society in climate adaptation projects?
Thank you, Anna, for this question, and thank you for inviting us to attend this side event as panelists. Okay, so we are an accredited entity to the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund, and we do have projects under execution where civil society are key partners. Some of our projects, they are the main executing entity. So we all talk about the bottom-up approach, which is a key approach to make a project succeed. And when we talk about bottom-up, it means the community needs to be involved at an early stage. Sometimes communities are not well organized, so we need another structure with whom we can talk and agree on the approach to develop the project, execute it, then put all the requirements to ensure the sustainability of its results, and there comes the role of the CSO organizations, civil society organizations. So the first characteristic of the civil society is their presence in the field. Some of the members of the association or NGOs are member of the community that is benefiting from the project. So they speak the same language, which is an added value. They know the place where the project is implemented, so they know that this is a place where we can do such an activity. Maybe we have conflict with other communities. They know all these details, and this will make the approach of the project more efficient, and then they will own it as communities benefiting from the project. Then the other positive point is that they feel more committed to the project than any other entity, because I will say it this way, because they live from projects. This is the difference between the government, where salaries are coming from other initiatives. So the commitment is at two levels, because it's coming to their communities, so they feel like they will have benefit. And the second one is, if you don't mobilize funds, you will just lose your income. So the motivation is double. Then there is the other point, which I explained previously, is that they know the attitude, perception of the locals. They know their traditions, so there is no conflict. They know how to deal with them. These are all positive points. Now I think I need also to talk about the negative ones. But these are not negative, but these are like gaps that may require enhancement and then complementarity with the government and national organizations. So sometimes, depending on the size of the organization with which we are partnering, if it's a small organization, sometimes it doesn't have enough breadth to run the whole process in developing the project, because it takes time and money and effort. So these small organizations, they can come during the process, but not at early stage, because they can't follow without money coming. So we contact these organizations. They are involved, but they are not the ones developing and involved in writing the project document, doing assessments, consultation with communities. Some other organizations are bigger. I'm taking the example of HPP, our key partner. Then we have, 1 minute. Okay, oh, time runs very quickly. Let me finish. Then Oxfam and Care Netherlands, these are big organizations. They can really, follow all the process to develop the project, then implement it. So, this is, the positive, the negative point for the small organizations, which could be a positive one for the bigger ones. Then the problem is the sustainability, because when the project ends, they need to hand over to the government, like the assets. If we construct something with a project being led by an organization, then it needs to go back to the government, because the money that has been mobilized by that CSO, for our case, is money going to the country and to the communities. So these are some adjustments and agreements that needs to be clarified in the grant agreement since the beginning. So yeah, we can't work without CSOs. And just 30 seconds more, please. We just had a discussion with the Adaptation Fund previously, like 2 hours ago. And we were raising an issue with government staff, how we need to deal with them. So one of their recommendations was, why don't you work with the CSO? And it's also a recommendation coming from the donor, because they trust this commitment of the CSO, which is more important than the other partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paula, for this insightful intervention. So we have heard already about how CSOs contribute, what's the added value, the challenges, the gaps. But I would like now to hear some concrete examples from the ground of how CSOs are leading climate adaptation. And I would like to start with Bangladesh and India. So the Sundarbans is the world's largest contiguous mangrove forest, and it's often considered one of the front lines of climate change. Environmentally, communities are dealing with a multitude of effects of climate change, which interact and compound the impacts on communities, culture, and indeed the economy. We have here Mohon and Yahanta from Bangladesh and India, respectively, and I would like to ask you to explain us how you're supporting coastal communities to build resilience for better adaptation. So maybe you start, Mohon.
Thank you, dear moderator. Dear distinguished keynote speaker, panelists, and the audience. Thank you very much. Greetings from my organization, LEDARS. LEDARS actually is a local NGO working in the southwest coastal region of Bangladesh. Already our government representative already mentioned that we are the most vulnerable country and we are the 7th most vulnerable country among the world. But within the Bangladesh, I think the southwest coastal region is most vulnerable due to the frequent disaster, salinity, water resources, and other vulnerabilities. So, and despite the limitation of resources, the NGOs in Bangladesh are doing very good job in actually in the field level. What we are doing, because in the coastal area in Bangladesh, there have some problems like the salinity, severe salinity effect in soil and water, and the health crisis is increasing, and also the drinking water is a scarcity of drinking water is a big problem in the coastal area. Among around 73% people are not getting the pure drinking water in the coastal area, and the cervical infection and other diseases increasing in the coastal area. It is a horrible situation. It is a disaster like in Bangladesh. So what we are doing, we are actually trying to increase the capacity of resilience of community people. Especially we are increasing the resilience capacity on agriculture so that people can adapt to the salinity and they can minimize their threats by using the surface waters and also using the stress tolerance seed and other technologies. And we are also developing the seed stores in the community so that they need not to be dependent on the market for their seeds, because the stress tolerance seed is limited in Bangladesh. So the government, they already discovered some seeds, but the production of seeds is not so high. And we are also excavating many ponds and the canals to restore the rainwater for the dry season cropping. And also we are installing the model house in the villages so that the community people, they can see what kind of technology they can adapt themselves. So we are developing the model house in the community. And also we already developed a technology park in the coastal area so that people can see people can visit our technology park to see what kind of technology they can adopt in their lives. And also the severe drinking water crisis, we are also addressing this issue. And we installing 5 kind of technologies in the community level. We installing a lots of rainwater harvesting systems. We are installing the ponds and filter. You know, the ponds and filter is a community water treatment technology that can treat the pond water for drink. And we are also installing the biosan filter. More than 6,000 filter we have been installed in the 6,000 families. And biosan filter is a low-cost, household-based water treatment technology that can purify the pond water also. And we are also developing, installing some other technologies so that people can get the best support from our services. We are also working in the health services and we are promoting the health. We are also working with the government so that they can give the better health services to the community. And we are also doing a good advocacy activities in Bangladesh. So because the southwest coastal region we are thinking that it is deprived from the FID allocation from the government, and the coastal area is vulnerable so much, but they are not getting proper support, proper allocation. So we are doing a big campaign in the country so that government can give their attention to the coastal communities. We keep some brochure and project profile on the table there. If you want to know more, you can take the document from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohon. Yanta, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let me try to build up on what my colleague from Bangladesh has just said. I know that in 240 seconds, it's difficult to talk about an area as big as 10,000 square kilometer, 5 million people, one of the hottest climate beds in the world, but still I'm trying my best to do that. On the outset, I should say that the Sundarban area, if you look at the area, as I said, 10,000 square kilometers, 100 islands, 5 million people, extremely high vulnerability and extremely low resilience. The poverty level of Sundarban is double that the level of this government of the country like India. So that's the situation is, I call it a rubber band syndrome. As you stretch a rubber band, and then you stretch beyond the point, it snaps. So Sundarban right now, at the point of rubber band syndrome, be it in India and be it contiguous Bangladesh. So we have to, when we think about adaptation, we think about the modalities to work on, to improve the resilience, we have to think on that line. I just give you one example. The Sundarban is affected by both long-term disaster and immediate disaster. The sea level rise in Sundarban is 8 millimeter per year, which is more than double than the global average. And if you look at the cyclones, in last, say, 10 to 20 years, we have been facing series of cyclones. In Indian Sundarban, last 3 years faced 4 or 5 major cyclones. I just give you one example. Amphan, you all know, is one of the biggest global cyclone in 2020. 3 million dwelling houses were affected. 1.7 million hectare agricultural field were affected by saline water. 2 million livestock were dead. That's only in the state of West Bengal, India. In Bangladesh, furthermore. So that's the situation. Now, if we look at the AR6 report, you will find that business as usual, Sundarban is temperature rise under the worst possible scenario, maybe 4.1 degree by the end of the century. That's in an area who contribute virtually nothing to the carbon cauldron of this world. They contribute nothing. Even the major part of Sundarban till few years back didn't have electricity. So those are being affected by the highest impact of climate change. That's a complete, I would say, there's a sense of betrayal. The people of Sundarban has a sense of betrayal to the world. The world is betraying with them. Now, with that in context, my organization, and let me let you know that in 2009, I brought Hassan Mahmood Saab, the Bangladesh Dadin Environment Minister, and Indian Minister Jairam Ramesh, along with some Bangladesh partners. We organized the first meeting on climate change in Sundarban in 2009. And that prompted the prime ministers of the two countries next year to sign an accord or sign some agreements on Sundarban. Unfortunately, those agreements mostly remained in paper, though have not been realized. Now, with that kind of context, we have been working with partners in Bangladesh and mostly in India in building up adaptation. Now, when we talk about adaptation, it is agriculture. The salt-tolerant agriculture is extremely important. It's very important to have fishery. If you look at the Sundarban livelihood, agriculture and fishery are the two most important livelihoods, and both being affected by climate change. Previously, a fisherman might have, within 4 hours, collected certain amount of fish. For now, that same amount of fish, they have to spend 12 hours. They are sitting in the narrow creeks within the Sundarban, sitting prey for tigers to attack. That's why you will find every year hundreds of people, hundreds of fishermen die in Sundarban just collecting fishes. So that is as bad as that. Then we are talking about the DRR, disaster risk reduction, promoting local livelihoods through ecotourism. These are all we are working on. But these are common. There's nothing new about it. What I'm trying to say, 2 more points out here, is number one, the limitation of adaptation mode. If you look at the AR6 report clearly says that there are parts of the area where it seems that adaptation is reaching its zenith. We have to redefine the mode of adaptation. We have to open up the scale of the opportunities to adaptation. Sundarban is one of those areas where we are getting to the limit of the adaptation. That's we need to take care of. Sundarban is another area where also AR6 report mentioned that the number of climate-driven episodes are happening together. You are happening sea level rise, you are happening cyclone, you are having high rain, you are having other things. So everything working together. So when we are talking about the funding, we have to consider a holistic mode of funding. There can't be standalone for one thing. You have to have holistic mode of funding that we are working for. We work very closely in the government of West Bengal, India, try to find out the way. Right now, before I came, we had very big meeting with the French consulate, how we can have the adaptations, how we can have funding out there, and that, be sure, only NGOs cannot do beyond a point in Sundarban. The government, NGO, all have to join hands. This is a very complicated terrain to work on. So that's where we are. And finally, I would like to say that if you look at the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation program, it says about the global goal of adaptation. Now, I was speaking to a series of experts, including Dr. Salim ul-Haq and others, and they mostly agree that we need to have the goal for regional goal, ecosystem goal. Unlike mitigation goal of 1.5 degree or something, we can't have a single goal for adaptation. So I strongly vouch here, I strongly argue here, I strongly kind of request my colleagues all here to take it forward that we need to have local goal of adaptation. And Sundarban is an area where we should fix up, along with Bangladesh, what should be the goal of adaptation there, and accordingly we should work on. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hope I was more or less back.
Was he?
More or less.
No.
More or less. More or less. That's it.
More or less, more or less. Okay, so lastly, from coastal areas, we are going to move to the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, sometimes called the Third Pole. We have here Mr. Nimasairen. As I have introduced before, he is senior consultant on climate adaptation in pastoral areas at the Shanshui Conservation Center in China. Mr. Nimasairen, can you please explain the experiences and the practices of herders in the Qinghai Tibet Plateau regarding climate adaptation? Mr. Nimasairen will speak in Chinese, and then it will be translated.
大家晚上好，我叫尼玛才任，来自青藏高原的腹地，是玉树藏族自治州的一名政府官员。玉树州呢，整个国土面积是20.3万平方公里，人口是41.8万。玉树州素有长江、黄河、澜沧江的发源之地，享有江河之源，中国水塔之美誉。
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nima Cairen. I come from the heart of the Tibetan Plateau, Yushu Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture, Qinghai Province. I am a government official and the senior consultant for Shanshui Conservation Center. Yushu Prefecture has a land area of 203,000 square kilometers with 5 counties and 1 city and a population of 418,000. It is the source of Yangtze River, Yellow River, and Lancang River. It is known as the source of rivers and the water tower of China.
接下来呢，我就对我们高原原住民如何治理气候变化，如何应对气候变化方面呢，我就讲几点。近几10年来，由于高原气候环境逐渐变暖的这种情况下来，整个高原出现了生态退化、植被退化、沙化和黑土滩的这种趋势来越来越严重。为了有效的应对这个气候变化，为高原牧民更好的顺应和适应 高原的这个气候环境啊，我们从畜牧业的经营的体制机制层面进行了全面的调整，也就是说，我们不再走工业化的养殖模式，而是走传统的四季游牧方式，向高质量、高品质的这样一种生活方式迈进，也就是绿色、有机、生态的方向，进行发展。主要呢，我们做了以下6个方面，也取得了非常好的一个成果。第一呢，我们走了传统的四季游牧来，实现了青藏高原9个月的生态的一个休养。第二呢，我们走了这个四季游牧来，让高原的原住民的文化得到修复和发展。第3点呢，就是通过走四季游牧来，增强和抵御了自然的各种灾害。第4点呢，通过走四季游牧来，我们能给野生动物留下了栖息空间，降低了人与这个野生动物之间的这个冲突。第5点呢，就是我们走了这个四季游牧啊，让高原的这个动物和植物趋于多元化和多样化。第6点呢，我们走了四季游牧啊，那就是实现了大面积的种植和购买饲草料，降低生态的压力，实现农牧民群众的这个生产生活的提升。
In recent decades, the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau has experienced more and more intense climate change, from melting glaciers, abnormal weather patterns, to grassland degradation and impacts on livestock, husbandry, and local livelihoods. In order to help indigenous people better respond and adapt to climate change in the plateau, we have made comprehensive changes to the institutional mechanisms of the livestock husbandry operations. Instead of industrialization, we have implemented the traditional knowledge of 4-season rotational grazing and seeking better and greener lifestyle. Previously, with the reformation of property rights, the grassland was divided and assigned to households and led to pasture fragmentation. Now we encourage more cooperative and rotational grazing. This change brings many benefits. First, rotational grazing allows the alpine ecosystem to recuperate for 9 months. Second, indigenous people can restore culture by traditional cooperative livelihoods. Third, the community will better enhance and the adaptation to climate-related disasters, such as droughts, floods, human and livestock epidemics. Fourth, natural habitats are conserved for wild animals, mitigating conflicts between human and wild animals. Fifth, the sustainable grassland management strategy improves biodiversity and restores ecosystems. Sixth, we can reduce the loss from extreme weather events such as snowstorms by growing grass and purchasing fodder in advance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nimosaiden. I'm afraid we are running out of time. I just saw on the screen that there is just 5 minutes left, maybe not even 5 anymore. So I'd like to ask one last question to all the speakers, and I hope that you can manage to answer in 1 or 2 sentences. And the question is, what can the governments and the donors do to strengthen civil society organizations' participation in climate adaptation? And also in this line, which kind of partnership would be more effective to unlock the potential of climate finance in the Global South? Any volunteer to start? You? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, dear moderator, to give me the chance to say something again. I think donor organization and government can build capacity of CSOs so that they can access and utilize of the fund like the Global Climate Fund or any other fund related to the climate change. And I think we can create a capacity building CSO network among the different countries and different subcontinent, including the private sector and academia and local government representative also, to and we can share our resources among our CSOs so that we can take preparation for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Sanil? Thank you.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So yeah, to be very brief, I would say three things. The first and foremost, the donors must increase the grant-based scaled-up adaptation finance in line with their commitment made last year in Glasgow to double the adaptation funding. So only if we have enough, then we call upon the change in the existing barriers which make it difficult for the CSOs to access the funding. For that, they need to introduce modalities for the devolved financing for adaptation. And thirdly, we need to move away from tokenistic representation to shift the powers where local actors and CSOs are allowed to make the decisions concerning them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David?
1 minute, no? Maybe a reflection rather than a statement. I think we easily forget, being at an event like COP27, that this whole sector is still new. It's still developing, really. So we talk about climate finance, all these institutions are just building their capacity, right? And from my experience, there's a lot of goodwill and good intentions everywhere around to do locally led adaptation, to do real country-driven solutions. And I think what we need to do is just to continue the dialogue and continue pushing for these two things: country-driven solutions, locally led adaptation. And I think this is a message we have to keep bringing to the donors and to the governments. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, David. Mr. Nimosairan, maybe?
.我们政府层面来对气候变化主要采取了2项大的这样一个举措。第一项举措呢，就是生态环境的这个防止退化层面；第二个呢，就是生态环境的修复层面。防止退化层面呢，就是玉树州层面呢，全面禁止砍伐森林；第二个呢，就是全面禁止盗采矿产资源；第三个呢，禁止捕猎野生动物，还有这个全面禁止各类企业这个工业企业的这个建厂。第五个呢，全面禁捕大江大河的各类鱼种。采取了这个5个方面。另外呢，第二个在修复方面呢，根据国家气候变化的这个相关要求啊，对休牧、农牧、捕播、改良。还有这个治理黑土滩、饲草料基地的这个建设，还有这个生态奖补和公益性岗位的这个设置，以及林地、草原、湿地等这个全面的这个保护呢，可以说是在光在2021年，玉树州各类生态和气候方面的这个资金投入呢，达到18.34亿元，这个资金量是非常之大。另外，对玉树州这个总共建设了这个13处这个自然保护区，包括三江源国家自然保护区。第三个呢，就是设置了这个各类生态管护员，总共人员达到3万人。我大致时间原因讲这么多。Thank you very much.
There are 2 major measures. First, we aim to prevent ecological degradation. We establish a total ban on deforestation, mining, hunting, fishing, and industrial construction. Second, we aim to protect and restore the ecosystems. For ecological conservation and climate adaptation, the Yushu Prefecture invested more than 1.8 billion yuan as of 2021. The funding is used in, but not limited to, grassland restoration, compensation for ecosystem services, community employment, and infrastructure for husbandry. The prefecture has also established 13 nature reserves and national parks, and more than 30,000 indigenous community members are recruited in ecological conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I will turn to my left now. Jaula.
Thank you. So from my end, I think the first thing to do is the mapping of the local CSO that are involved in the action, then reinforcing that network between all the active organizations in the project area or in the initiative area, or even without project, means we need to link together, because this will create knowledge. We reinforce the existing network of CSOs, and also could be a very important resource for knowledge. So sometimes we don't have the information at the national or government level, but still it is with these organizations. So from my point of view, it's very important to give the CSO their position in all this system. They are really an important actor, and we need to deal and work with them in a very close way from the beginning up to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yahanta, you're the last one. So over to you.
Thank you. I think it's imperative. I think let me talk in context of Sundarban only, because it's I'm here talking about Sundarbans. I think it's imperative that government, CSO, and the funding agencies had some level of linkages among themselves. That linkage can vary from association to association, that can vary from place to place, but they need to have linkage. Otherwise, I think every CSO needs to understand that they cannot possibly replicate government. They cannot replace government. And they need to have an exit policy at your hand. When you are in a project, working in a project, call it a program, and 5 years, 10 years down the line, you have to come out of that program. So if the government is not integrated with that, if the local panchayati raj system, local governance, they are not part of it, who will take it forward? So at my understanding is, as we are working, both at the regional government level and more importantly as a local government level, you need to have that linkage. And there has to be mutual trust between the government, local government, and the CSOs of any particular project. And just one line about the donors. Yes, donors are very important. Without donors, you can't really move on. But donors also sometimes come up with a fixed set of ideas. They think this has to be done. And unfortunately, they kind of do not reconcile with the local realities, local vagaries. Say, Sundarban is, for example, is an extremely heterogeneous area. So if you work in Bangladesh Sundarban, you have one set of things. But if you, with that set of ideas, come to Indian Sundarban, it's different. Even within Indian Sundarban, Western Sundarban is different, and Central Sundarban is different. So you have to have that local understanding, local arrangement. If you don't have, you allow yourself to understand that, and then you can push on your agenda. If the donors don't do that, they come up with a fixed idea, try to impose on that, and CSOs need to go with that for the funding, that end of the day goes into a disaster. So point number one, association between government, CSOs, and donor is urgent and imperative at various levels. And number two, donors has to understand the local realities before imposing their own understanding on the project.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we ran out of time. I mean, we are over time, but maybe we can see 2 minutes if there are some questions from the audience. Okay, who has the mic? Just a second, please. If you can introduce yourself before asking the question, please.
Thank you. I am Muhammad Al-Sayed, the Executive Director of Nahda Makers Organization, a civil society organization in Yemen, working in development and climate activities. Our question here is, or justification is, the links that the colleague said, how can we link together as a networks to experience from each other, because always Yemen is under attention. Always the attention for other countries, while Yemen, as you know, it's one of the first humanitarian crisis in the world, so that it is under attention and a lot funding coming to the humanitarian. Not it is less impact with no adaptation in the ground. So that we as CSOs in the ground, we know the situation, we have solutions with the government, so that we can work together. So that we want to take the attention of donors to engage us in adaptation solutions to have more impacts in the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that? Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much to all. Sorry?
Don't respond to that.
Okay.
Very well taken. I think very well taken what you have just said, and I think we can build up.
Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Sorry?
Thank you. Excuse me.